Hi everyone, I'm just going to try and film this. It's a bit dark in here and it's raining, so I'm hoping that the sound will be okay. If the rain gets any harder I might have to stop. Today I'm going to talk to you about glazing, and we're going to do a palette here of colours, glazing them together, and then we're going to do a small painting that shows you the techniques of glazing. Okay, please excuse my fingernails. It's on day 2 of red, Christmas red, but you can see I've been decorating my studio this morning and it's looking very nice, I have to say. I've gone for grey and yellow, and you can see my nails have taken a bit of a beating. Anyway, okay, so what I've got here is a small palette. This is a travel palette, really useful. They come with a little tiny travel brush, and I just want you to show you just using these colours in this travel palette, the ideas behind glazing. Now glazing is just layering, so you can layer the same colour on top of the same piece of paper. So if you were painting a yellow balloon, for example, and you put a thin coat of yellow down and it wasn't strong enough, you could just put another coat on, and then another coat on, and then another coat on, until you get the depth of tone that you need. The other way of doing it is creating colours using layers. So you might put a layer of yellow down, and then the second layer might be a layer of red, and in the process of doing that, in the process of putting red on top of yellow, you would achieve an orange. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put, and you might want to do this at home with your watercolour sets, is starting with the cadmium yellow. I might take a bigger brush actually. Let me just get a bigger brush. So I've just got a round number 6, just so I can get the colour on quite quickly. And I'm going to go in with the cadmium. I've got cadmium yellow here. Now, my paints are notoriously dirty, so if they have got colour on them on the top from previous mixes, just try and get rid of it. You can either dab it off with a bit of paper or lift it off with your brush, but you want a nice clean colour like that going down. Okay, then wash your brush off, and while you're working with your yellows it's okay to go in again with the same brush. So I'm into the yellow ochre now. I'm just going to put a nice streak of yellow ochre there. You can see my yellow ochre is quite dark, and then into the reds. So I've got a cadmium red here, and you can see my cadmium red in this set is sitting on the orange side, so it could even be an orange red rather than a cadmium red. It really depends on the brand of paint that you're using as to what sort of reds you get out. Check the sides, because the colour tends to be written on the sides of the pans. These are pans, these are called half pans, and you get full pans which are double sized, but they generally have the name written on the side of them if you need to double check. They're quite difficult to get out, but if you use a craft knife, oh wrong one, a craft knife, then they ping out quite easily. So we're into burnt sienna. I'm not sure whether this is a burnt sienna actually. Let me just try it. Yeah, actually that's not too bad. Okay, and then into the burnt umber, which is your dark umber colour. Now if you've got different colours in your set, don't worry, just write the colours at the top like I've done here, so that you know what they are. Then we're into the sap greens. Doesn't matter what colours you're using here, it's just the layering that we're looking at and how the colours behave on top of one another. So that's the sap green, into the viridian, which is very strong. Oh, I'm only just going to fit that in. We need to get 2 blues. I've gone a bit too far with this, but never mind. Right, so we're into cobalt blue, and then the last colour is the ultramarine, I think. Yeah. Okay. So I've gone right to the edge there. I've sort of run out of space a bit, but never mind. Now, what you want to do is just quickly dry that off. Oh, that's if we have any power. Yep. Okay, so then all you're going to do is you're going to use clean water and repeat the exercise, but just horizontally. So start with your cadmium yellow, make sure you've got a nice clean brush, and we're going to work across. Okay, so this is why it's essential that it's dry, because the glaze won't work if it's wet. It'll just start to mix in. Okay, so just lightly, don't rub it, because if you rub it, it'll start mixing. What you're looking for is a dry, a wet over a dry mix, so that you get a layering effect rather than a mixing effect. Okay, lightly, 2 strokes maximum. So we're into cadmium red now. And you want it to be reasonably thin, so you can actually see the colours through one another. If you have them too thick, it won't work. So just keep going. And you know, if you've got a larger set, then obviously work on a larger piece of paper. I mean, it's good to have a record of how the colours are in each set that you have. And what you can do is make a swatch like this, and then you can laminate them and put them in your sets, in the lids of your sets, so that you then have a record of how these things, of what you've got in your palette. Okay, so like I said, just 1 or 2 strokes, no more, because it'll start mixing. Then we're into greens, so we're into the sap green, and then into the Viridian. I've written my names of the colours on the top. If you've got space, you can write them on the side again. It's good to get used to these, the names of these colours. Like that. And the last one is the ultramarine. Oops, just dipped into the brown there by accident. Okay, so there you can see how, let's just zoom in a bit, how my colours in my set, which is a Winsor & Newton travel set, work. Okay, so you can see that if you layer cadmium yellow on top of cadmium yellow, all you're getting is a stronger tonal version of cadmium yellow. If you layer cadmium yellow on top of cadmium red, then the result is an orange, and so on and so forth. You know, if you've gone onto the sap green and you put yellow over the top, you've got a lighter tone of yellow, of green, and so on. You know, if you put red on top of blue, you end up with purple. If you put green on top of yellow, you'll end up with a lighter green, and so on. Okay, so just have a bit of a play with layering, just by using the colours that are in your set. This is called glazing, rather than mixing. Whereas you mix 2 colours, 2 wet colours together in a palette, then that's what you would get. This is different. It's a colour theory to do with how the eye accepts colour. So it is about, it's a bit, if you look into the Impressionists and especially the Pointillists, what they would do is they would take a dot of red and put it next to a dot of yellow, and from a distance, because your eye merges the colours together, that would become an orange. And these will behave differently when they're dry. Okay, so do a test patch and have a go. So the next thing we're going to do to experiment with glazing is to make a picture similar to this. Now this is very sort of two-tone almost, but I'm going to do it with a lot more colour. So all it is a series of balloons with a silhouette of a child and then a little bit of a distant landscape. I'm going to draw this out. I'm going to put it on time lapse so that you can watch me draw it out. You can trace it, you can do whatever you want with it. You can make it bigger, smaller, you can add more balloons, you can put more texture in the sky, whatever you want to do, but just watch me draw it now. Okay, so I decided not to draw the balloons in the end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the sky first, and then if you choose you can draw your balloons on. However, I might just paint them directly on. So depending on how comfortable you are with that, either draw them out or not, it's up to you. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to work in a wet on dry sky. I'm just going to wet down the colour of the sky that I want, which is a cobalt blue. I'm going to add some red into that as well, and I'm just going to wet this because while I'm talking this can be drying off. So we're just doing wet in wet, and as you know, or you don't, you may not, you may have joined my membership recently, or you might have been a member from the start and you know all about this, but this is just wet in wet. Lightly wet your paper and then take the colour. I'm going to mix a purpley tone, so I'm going to take some of that blue. I'm just going to add in a little bit of the alizarin crimson to make it a bit of a purple. I'm just going to put that in. It looks quite dark, but as it spreads down it will fade. My design desk here is on an angle, so my paint will naturally flow downwards. So I do want it to be darker at the top and lighter at the bottom. So I'm just going to sort of fade it out as it goes down, like that. And just let it, just going to put a little bit more blue at the top, like that, just to give it a little bit more richness. Okay, and then the bottom part here is a darker version of that colour, so I'm just going to quickly just dry this off very lightly. Okay, now, so we're going to take a slightly redder mix of that colour that I just made up, which is ultramarine and, sorry, cobalt blue and alizarin crimson. If you want to use, you can use cerulean blue if you haven't got cobalt. I'm just going to put in that distant hill there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, now this is wet on dry, so I didn't wet the paper beforehand. I'm just going to put a little bit of water down the bottom section so that colour can sort of drain into it. Can you see? So it's slightly darker at the top than it is at the bottom. Okay, and just encourage it downwards. It'll just give it a feeling of a bit of mist at the base of that colour. Okay, dry it off again. A hairdryer is a good investment if you haven't got one. Just use an old one if you've got a couple. You, of course, don't need to hairdry it unless you have to. I'm just doing it for speed. I'm just going to add a little bit more of the ultramarine blue into that colour mix, and I'm going to do the same with the next layer. I mean, this is pretty much what we were doing a couple of weeks ago with the tonal paintings, so it's a good chance for you to practice. And then the front layer is going to be a sort of dark purple, so I'm just going to dry this off again. Okay, and I'm just going to add a little bit more red into that colour, and it's just a darker mix than the one we used above. Okay, and again, if it's not dark enough, you can always put another coat on once it's dry, but maybe dry it off and see how dark it is and see if it's acceptable, and if it's not, just give it another coat. And with that, that is a glaze. So a second coat of the same colour is also called a glaze, along with the one that we've got here, which is also a glaze when you put different colours on top of one another. Okay, so this at the moment is wet because I've only got a small piece of paper and I might want to lean on it. I'm going to dry this off as well. Okay, right, so this is the fun bit. You can choose to use as many or as few colours as you want to with this bit. So the idea is that you just make it up. The image is a series of different coloured balloons, but because it's late at night and the sun is setting, they're obviously all merging into one. There's some blue ones in there, there's red, there's purple. If you want to stick to that colour mix, then go ahead, but it's up to you. So I'm just going to take a bit of blue here, and I'm going to just start at the top. And there's no right and wrong to this, but please make sure that your balloons are big enough. And you can start quite thin with your glaze, like this. Remember that the balloon will come down to a point. It can be quite rough. And then decide, do I want another blue one? Yeah, maybe. I'll put one there. And you can do different sizes, and you can even do different shapes. It's up to you. But do some light and some dark, so that you get a different effect with them. Right. When you start working on top of one another, however, this is when you need to dry things off. So I've just changed the colour. I'm going to do some red ones, and do some on a slight angle, because obviously the strings are drawn in to the hand of the boy, so they will have a slight angle to them rather than them all pointing upwards. So take that into consideration. I'm going to add a little bit more colour and a little bit more water and do a slightly larger red balloon here. Let's go for a red, just a true red. So this is cadmium red, whereas the one previous was a mix. Let's now have a purple, which I'm going to use the alizarin crimson. I prefer, for a purple, I prefer to use alizarin crimson rather than cadmium red. Cadmium red tends to sort of dull the colour down for some reason. I think it's probably because it's got more black in it. So just be aware of that when mixing your colours. Just add a little bit of water in. And just keep going like that. Now when you get to a certain point, your balloons don't really want to come down any lower than the horizon line. Okay, so I'm just going to put a yellow one in just so you can see. Now the colour will vary according to where it's sitting in the sky as well. The lower down ones will be slightly brighter than ones up the top because they are being affected by the colour of the sky, because you're glazing on top of the colour of the sky. So just be aware of that. That yellow will be slightly duller because of this colour that's underneath. You've glazed yellow on top of blue, purple here. So if you look at our glazing chart here, and you look towards the sort of reds with the yellows, going across to the blues and things like that, you can see how the colour behaves. So now I've got to this point, I want to dry this off. Only because I don't want these colours to mix. So this is where your lightness of hand comes in now. What you want to do is make sure that when you make a mark that you're light, very light. Don't scrub with your brush, because what we want to happen is we want to layer these colours, and if you really press with your brush, what you're going to do is you're going to mix the colours underneath with the colour on top. And what we want is to see that happening. Can you see where that colour is layered, glazed, one on top of the other, and is creating a different tone? Okay, so let's take a bit of blue and put a blue one here, like this. So this is showing you how glazing behaves, the theory of it. And you can see the difference in colour between that bit and that bit. I'm going to use a red. Oops. Let's just get a clean bit of palette here and put a red one here. It's quite satisfying, this, because it's you know, you're learning theory, but it's actually quite a lovely practical exercise that makes it very obvious. Theory can be a bit dull at times, colour theory that is, but if you do a little exercise to practice the colour theory, then it can help. Now that, you can see, sorry, that was wet, so I'm just going to dry that off quick. So if you make the same mistake as I did just then, just dry it off quickly, because what will happen is that will bleed into that colour that's underneath. So, and we don't want that. So make sure whatever you're working on top of is dry before you work on top of it. That was a good mistake to make here in front of you, because it will show you what happens. Okay. What other colours have we got in here? We've got a dark blue. Let's try a bit of dark blue. And we'll put that down here. What other colours? We'll put a red. Just a normal cadmium red. We'll put that one there, I think. Again, I should have dried that off there. So I'm not going to put too much paint on that side. You see how lovely it looks when it really starts building up here. Those layers of balloons, and you would get this effect with balloons because they are transparent, so you know it's a really good exercise to practice. I'm just going to do another purple. I think I'm just going to put it here, but I need to dry. a dark purple, because I want this balloon to stand out a bit more from the ones in the foreground, in the background should I say. I think we'll go for another dark one, and I think I'll just use red, and I'll put that one up here, just so you've got some balance between the darker tones and the lighter tones. Don't have loads of light tones and just one dark balloon, then the balance will be off. Okay, I think that'll do, or maybe I'll put another one there, because it's good to have threes as well, work in threes. Let's have a see, what should we do, a yellow? Maybe pop a yellow over there, here, be quite nice I think. Yeah, groups of three are always really successful for composition, so 3 trees are better than 2, etc, etc. Okay, right, there we go. I think I'll leave that now. So I'm just going to quickly dry it off again. So I'm quite happy with that. I think the last thing that I'm going to do before I start painting in the boy is the strings. Now the strings are very fine, very fine indeed. So you might want to try painting these with a variety of brushes before you make a mark on this paper. So I've got the back of a piece of watercolour paper here, and I'm just going to lightly, yeah, that's not too bad. Okay, you can see that this rigger brush, if I use a very light hand, is going to be okay. Make sure that you don't use anything too thick, because it will look clunky. And if you're really not sure, then use a pencil or a pen, but like I said, it's got to be fine. And these, oops, are not easy to paint. Doesn't matter if they sort of come and go, and they all need to stem from that hand, that boy's hand, so don't be careful with where they come from and where they go to. You can layer some on top of the others, but make sure that some go behind the others as well. You might be able to see some of them through, but they won't all be in front of. So like there, stop, and then carry on. Did you see what I did there? I hope you can see this, and I'm not just sort of standing over. So in front of that one, but behind that one, and this one can go further up there. We could have one going that way like that, one going that way like that. Okay, you can always go over those. I don't know whether I was in the way there, but I had to sort of rest my hand on my work, so I had a steady mark. Okay, so the next thing to do, so like I said, if you need to draw those balloons in, then you can. So the next thing is to draw the face of this boy. If you're not too confident with painting, now you need to get him the right size. So make sure his head is sort of this big. It comes down and around and is silhouetted by the light that's shining from the background. So he's got his nose coming down there, again, if you're happy with freehand painting this, then you can have a go, but I'm not, so I'm going to draw him in first and get him right. So it's quite a sort of wedge shape. I don't know if I've got his head long enough there. I think his head needs to come out a bit more. Anyway, I will alter that with the paint. And he's got a collar on, and then his shoulders come down and across. I've got him slightly over, then more over to the left, to the middle of the balloons than he should be. So I'm going to have to draw his hand coming down and going up a bit like that. So into his body like that. Okay. You can decide to put the other, the silhouette of the other person in if you want to. I'm just going to paint this for now and see how I go. So I've got some burnt umber, and I'm going to put some dark blue in it, and you can mix some black in it or some Payne's grey if you've got it in your set. It needs to be dark, so with regard to that you just need to keep adding pigment until it's really dark. Alright, so nice and thick for this. You can do a layer and then add another layer if you need to, and if you're not confident with drawing the boy, then just take a piece of tracing paper and trace him. But it's good practice to have a go at drawing these features. Oops, made his nose a bit big there. So keep going, filling him in, and hopefully you won't make his nose bigger than it should be, like I just did there by accidentally poking a bit of paint in a place where it shouldn't have been going. But you're just after a silhouette, you know, and silhouettes are not really difficult. But like I said, if you prefer to draw this out first before painting it, then do that. So like I said, because I've come over a little bit hard on this side, I'm just going to, I'll just fill this body in, and then we can see what we're doing. A little bit more paint I need, a bit more brown, a bit more black. There we go. Like I said, you can always glaze another layer on top of this if it's not dark. Sort of grey black colours tend to dry lighter, so like I said, if once it's dried it's not dark enough, then just put another glaze on, another chance to practice your glazing. Okay, so because my figure is too far over, the balloon should have been over this side a bit more, he should have been over that side a bit more, but because I'm working on a small piece of paper here, it doesn't matter. But I'm just going to bend his arm, so you can see I've put an elbow in, and I'm just going to put that up there, which is this forearm, and then I'll put a suggestion of a hand in. Right, so that sort of shape. Okay, so it looks like he's holding on to those balloon strings. Now let's try and sort his nose out. It's quite clunky. It's probably because I'm not using the right shape brush. There we go. That's a bit better. Okay, I'll put a little bit of a curl there. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to try and draw another person. So there's one in the distance here who's quite faint, but it will animate it a bit more if you, and also give you the opportunity to practice painting people. With watercolour, often the people aren't this close, so you don't need to paint them with much detail. So we tend to paint them in little shapes like this. So we'd have a head. Oh, can't really see it on there, can you? Let me just use this piece of paper. So you'd have a head like this, and then underneath you have like a triangular shape. Now to that you would add arms, legs, and so on and so forth. So you just need to sort of build on that shape because these are a bit closer to you. However, they are in silhouette, so they don't need too much detail. So just roughly put a person in. If you're much closer to the people like these ones over here, then just be careful and get the drawing right. So like I said, I'm going in here directly with my paintbrush, but if you're not confident doing that, then please use a pencil first, and then you can trace it or draw it and rub it out if you get things wrong and so on. Alright, so we've got a head coming round here with a sort of flick, and then a forehead, and then the nose comes out like that, and then it goes in, and then there's a slight chin. Okay, and then the chin is actually into the it's in the neck, the collar of the person, and then it merges into another head which is just down here. There must be a child or something with a sort of peak cap on, and then it goes all solid. So once you've got those descriptions, we've got a hand coming out here like that. So rough in a hand like that, and then there's a sort of jumper shape or something in here, and then the leg comes down like that, so it looks like it's walking into the picture. Okay, so again, make them as light or as dark as possible, but like this guy is the main feature, so maybe you put a second coat on him. I'm just going to alter this because this is not quite right. I'm just going to put a shoulder higher. It's kind of nice to freehand paint figures sometimes. Okay, so there we are. I'm just going to dry it off. Okay, just take this off so you can see the finished article. It's a really lovely picture to work on, and it could be something that you do a larger version of, maybe with more people, or even with a sunset, or it could be in a particular place, like on the promenade at Porthcawl, or do you know what I mean? Wherever balloon sellers would be. You know, they'd be near fairgrounds, circuses, etc., etc. So, you know, this one is of an Indian. I think this is in India. Okay, so there we go. I'm just going to zoom out a little so you can have a look at the whole thing. So remember, we did this glazing here. Again, you know, keep these because they are really useful. I often just have them sticking on my wall so that I can refer to them. The other thing that you can do is just stick them to a page of a sketchbook or something like that, or like I said, make a smaller version, laminate it and put it in your in the lid of your set. You know, you can just pop it in there, laminated, and then you can refer back to your colour mixes, your glazes when you need to. Okay, so there is the glazing again. It's now dry, so you can really see. It'd probably be quite difficult from a distance to see the results, but if you look at close up, you can really see how it varies with the different colours on top of one another. And then this is the balloon picture, and you can see how the glazing there has affected the different layers. Alright, so a very quick, satisfying introduction to glazing. Have fun with it, and like I said, work on a small piece, get into the feel of glazing and understand it, and then work on something larger to keep practicing. Alright, and have fun with it. It's a beautiful little picture. I might put it in a frame actually. Okay, enjoy and see you next time.